voice that shook the world. The night air in 9 Mile, Jamaica carried the scent of burning wood and damp soil. A thin boy with restless eyes sat on the worn steps of a wooden shack, a battered acoustic guitar resting awkwardly in his lap. The strings were rusted, 2 of them replaced with fishing line, but to him it was still a weapon, not a violence, but a truth. His name was Robert Nesta Marley, but in these streets, names didn't matter as much as survival. He had no father to guide him, no wealth to shield him. What he had was a rhythm in his veins, the syncopated heartbeat of reggae, and an unshakable belief that sound could travel further than bullets. The world did not know his name yet, but in the dark, under the flickering light of a single kerosene lamp, his voice was already becoming something more than music. It was raw, rough, and drenched in the salt water struggle. When he sang, even the wind seemed to slow down to listen. He had grown up in a place where joy and hardship lived side by side, where a man could be dancing barefoot in the street 1 hour and fighting for food the next. In Jamaica's political unrest of the 1960s, music wasn't entertainment. It was survival. Every verse was a message, every chorus a call to arms. For Bob, the guitar wasn't just an instrument. It was a confession booth. He would lean into it, close his eyes, and pour out the grief of the hungry, the dreams of the poor, and the quiet fury of the oppressed. People began to notice. The neighbors, the market women, the stray kids with bare feet, they all came to hear the skinny youth who sang like the earth itself was speaking through him. But even in those early days, there was a fire in him that refused to be tamed. When other boys sang about love and dancing, Bob sang about chains and freedom. His voice didn't just carry a melody. It carried a warning, a prophecy. One evening, at a dusty street corner in Kingston, he played for a small crowd. The air was thick with heat, sweat clinging to every face. A man in the audience, older, weary-eyed, whispered his friend, "This youth, he sings like he's fighting a war we can't even see." That was the truth. Bob Marley's war wasn't fought with guns or knives. It was fought with chords, verses, and the steady, hypnotic beat of reggae. He believed, even then, that music could make a man stand taller than fear. The hook that would one day wrap around the world was already forming in his mind. He didn't know how far his voice would travel, but he knew it would reach places where injustice hid in the shadows. As the night grew late, the crowd began to thin. Bob sat alone, strumming under the moonlight, his voice low, almost himself. One day they will hear us, even the ones who don't want to. In that moment, under the Caribbean sky, the boy from 9 Mile wasn't just making music. He was building a weapon of hope, and soon the world would hear it. Music as a weapon. The streets of Kingston were loud with chaos. Not the chaos of music, but of politics. 2 rival parties, the PNP and the JLP, had turned neighborhoods into battlegrounds. Gunfire echoed in the nights, and fear became the currency of daily life. In that storm, Bob Marley's voice began to cut through like a blade. The Wailers had formed, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and Bob, a trinity bound not by fame, but by a shared hunger for truth. Their rehearsals were not in plush studios. They were in cramped rooms thick with smoke, walls sweating from the Caribbean heat. They played until their fingertips burned, until their throats were hoarse, because every song felt urgent, like a letter that had to be delivered before morning. When they recorded Get Up, Stand Up, it wasn't just a track, it was a manifesto. The words rolled like thunder over the oppressed. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. It was dangerous to sing like that in Jamaica at the time. Lyrics could be as lethal as bullets. The government listened, the street gangs listened, and the people listened. Bob knew the risks, but he also knew that silence was a luxury he could never afford. The band began to play in bigger spaces, not because promoters saw profit, but because crowds demanded it. There was a fever in the air when Marley stepped on stage, his dreadlocks swaying like the banners of an invisible army. When he sang, people didn't just clap, they shouted, they cried, they believed. But Marley was no politician. Even though both sides wanted to claim him, he was a bridge, and that made him dangerous to everyone who profited from division. He spoke of unity when unity was unprofitable. He sang of peace when war was convenient. The tension built with every performance. Whispers followed him, men with guns asking questions, strangers lurking near his home. He felt it in his bones. Music had made him powerful, but it had also made him a target. One night, backstage before a concert, a young fan slipped past the guards, clutching a small notebook. She asked for an autograph, but instead of handing it back, she whispered, "They're talking about you, Bob. Be careful." He smiled faintly, as if danger was just another verse in his song. "Music can't kill me, sister, but it might just save them." And then he walked on stage, the lights burning into his eyes, the crowd roaring like an ocean. Every chord he struck was a bullet aimed not at bodies, but at fear itself. By now, the government and gang leaders both understood Bob Marley was no longer just an artist. He was a force. And in Jamaica, forces like that rarely lived in peace for long. The storm was coming, and it would arrive one December night in the form of gunfire. The night of bullets, the night of December 3rd, 1976, began with the scent of rain in the air. Kingston streets shimmered under the glow of street lamps, puddles reflecting fragments of neon signs and rusted tin rooftops. In 2 days, Bob Marley was set to perform at the Smile Jamaica concert, a free show meant to ease the violent tension gripping the island. But everyone knew that peace was dangerous business. Bob had been receiving warnings for weeks. Friends told him to cancel. Even strangers, those same strangers who stop in the market to thank him for his songs, whispered, "Dem not gonna let you sing, Bob." Yet he refused to hide. "This concert is for the people," he said simply, "and the people can't wait." 8:30 p.m. Inside 56, Hope Road, his home, his refuge, and a kind of open-door community center. The Wailers were rehearsing. The house was alive with sound. Guitar riffs spilling from the back room, laughter from the kitchen, the low murmur of visitors drifting in and out. Rita Marley, his wife, was preparing to leave for an errand. Bob was in the kitchen, holding his guitar not like a performer, but like a man holding a shield. Then footsteps. Too quick, too heavy. The front door burst open. Men stepped inside with guns drawn, their eyes cold, movements sharp and rehearsed. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. For a moment, the only sound was the whine of a mosquito circling the single ceiling bulb. The first shot rang out, a crack that split the air. It hit Rita in the head, grazing her scalp, spinning her backwards but not taking her life. Another shot shattered the wooden doorframe. Bob turned instinctively toward the noise, and a bullet sliced through his arm, burning like a brand. A second tore into his chest, missing his heart by inches. Chaos erupted. People dove for floor, overturned chairs, scrambled for cover. The smell of gunpowder filled the house, stinging eyes and throats. Someone screamed. Another shot rang out. In the middle of it all, Bob didn't run. Later, witnesses would swear they saw him standing there, gripping his guitar like he might actually strike back with it. His eyes weren't wide with fear. They were narrowed, steady, like a man trying to memorize the faces of those who had come to kill him. The gunmen fled as quickly as they came, disappearing into humid night, leaving behind blood, shattered glass, and a silence more deafening than the gunfire. Minutes later, Bob was bandaged in the living room. Rita, pale but conscious, sat beside him. Someone suggested canceling the concert. "You have to rest, Bob. You've been shot." He looked at them, expression unreadable. The people who are trying to make this world worse, they're not taking a day off. How can I? 2 nights later, on December 5th, Bob Marley stepped onto stage at the National Heroes Park, his injured arm dangling by his side, his shirt hiding the fresh wound on his chest. Tens of thousands of Jamaicans filled the air with heat and expectation. When he took the microphone, the crowd roared, not just for the music, but for the defiance. He didn't mention the shooting. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. His voice, ragged, powerful, unbroken, carried through the night like a war drum for peace. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the lights, the men who had tried to silence him might have been watching. If they were, they learned something that night. Bullets could pierce skin, but they could not stop a song. Exile and return. The days after the shooting were heavy with heat and whispers. Jamaica felt different. The colors less bright. The music in the streets somehow muted. Bob Marley, the man who could fill a park with hope, was suddenly a marked target. Friends warned him that Kingston's air was thick with danger, that his face was on the lips of men whose hands were never far from a trigger. He never liked the idea of running. But this was not retreat, it was survival. London would be the next chapter. January 1977. The city greeted him with a cold that bit into his skin. Gone was the warmth of Caribbean sun. Here the sky hung low and gray, and the rain felt like it could wash the color from the world. Marley rented a small place on Oakley Street in Chelsea, modest by rockstar standards, but to him was just enough space to think, to heal, and to work. The bullet wounds were still tender. His arm ached when he played, but the music came anyway, pouring out in long, hypnotic sessions that sometimes lasted until dawn. The walls of that flat became paper-thin barriers between Bob's raw ideas and the cold London night. It was here that Exodus was born, not just an album, but a map, a prophecy, a migration of the soul. The songs blended roots reggae with the pulse of a world in motion. There was the warmth of Jamaica in Three Little Birds, the political fire of Exodus, the tenderness of Waiting in Vain. Each track felt like it was carved from the marrow of his life. Joy and pain bound together, inseparable. London audiences were different from Kingston's. They didn't dance with the same abandon, but they listened, they leaned in, and in the late-night clubs and BBC interviews, Bob's voice began to cut through Europe like it had cut through Jamaica. Steady, prophetic, impossible to ignore. But Jamaica was never far from his mind. Every letter from home carried news of more bloodshed, more division. Rival gangs still carved lines through the streets. Political leaders still stirred the pot. And the people, his people, still walked with fear in their eyes. Then came the invitation. The One Love Peace Concert, scheduled for April 1978. An event to bring together not just music lovers, but an entire fractured nation. Marley was asked to return and perform. It was more than just a show. It was a risk. His friends reminded him that the men who tried to kill him might still be out there. But Bob only smiled that quiet smile. If my music can't walk back into Jamaica, then it don't mean a thing. April 22nd, 1978, National Stadium, Kingston. The stadium pulsed like a living thing. 30,000 voices waiting, sweating, breathing in the thick island heat. Marley stepped onto the stage, dreadlocks swinging, guitar strapped like a weapon across his chest. The crowd erupted. And then the moment, midway through jamming, he stopped singing. He called Prime Minister Michael Manley and opposition leader Edward Seaga onto the stage. The two men approached reluctantly, the history between them heavy enough to crush the air. Marley took their hands, one in each of his, and raised them high above his head. The crowd roared like a wave breaking. For a brief moment, the island fell whole. It wasn't a permanent peace. The guns didn't vanish. But that night, for a few minutes under the Kingston stars, Bob Marley made enemies touch hands and share the same stage. He gave them and the world a vision of what unity could look like. And even as the applause echoed in the darkness, he knew the fight wasn't over. The real enemy was already inside him, growing in silence. Next, we enter episode 5, The Unseen Enemy, where the first signs of the cancer appear and Marley begins a private war with time while still standing in the spotlight. The Unseen Enemy. It began as something so small, it could almost be ignored. A stubborn spot on his right big toe, a mark from a football match played in the warm Jamaican sun. Bob loved the game, loved the rush of chasing the ball barefoot on grass, the laughter with friends between matches. So when he jammed his toe, he brushed it off as just another bruise, the kind every player carried like a badge. But this one didn't fade. Months passed, and the toe ached in a strange way, not just when he ran, but even when he rested. The nail turned dark. The skin refused to heal. Marley finally agreed to see a doctor in London, expecting to hear it was an infection. Instead, the room grew heavy with the silence that follows bad news. The diagnosis, acral-lentiginous melanoma, a rare and aggressive skin cancer. It had been growing quietly, hidden under nail, spreading roots where no one could see. The doctors had a solution, amputation. Remove the toe entirely. Stop the cancer before it moved deeper into his body. But Marley hesitated. His Rastafarian faith taught that the body is sacred, not to be cut unless absolutely necessary. He chose a less drastic option, removing only the nail and the tissue beneath. It bought him time, but not much. On stage, no one knew. The concerts continued, sweat glistening under the lights, dreadlocks flying as he moved, voice strong enough to shake the air. But behind the music, there was pain. Every jump, every run across the stage sent a pulse of fire up his leg. And yet, he never let the crowd see weakness. In the dressing rooms, he would quietly remove his shoe, massage the aching foot, and slip it back on before the next set. His bandmates noticed, but never pressed him. They knew Marley's stubbornness, the same stubbornness that made him sing 2 days after being shot, would not allow pity. By 1980, the cancer had spread. It was no longer confined to his toe. It had moved into his leg, his lungs, even his brain. And yet, Bob chose to tour. The Uprising tour would be his last, though few knew at the time. September 20th, 1980, Madison Square Garden, New York. The crowd roared as Marley stepped into the spotlight. He moved with the same energy as always. But if you look closely, you could see it. The subtle wince when he landed on his right foot, the way he shifted his weight ever so slightly to the left. Still, when he sang, "Could You Be Loved?" the place felt like it was floating. 2 days later, in Central Park, he collapsed while jogging. The cancer had reached his brain. Even then, he refused to let the story end. He performed one final show, September 23rd, 1980, in Pittsburgh. No one in the audience knew they were witnessing history. His voice, though strained, carried a strange, haunting beauty that night, as if he knew he was singing not just to them, but the time itself. Backstage after the encore, he sat in the dim light, sweat dripping from his face, and whispered to a friend, "Music is forever. I am not." One love, one last stand. The diagnosis was no longer a whisper in the back of his mind. It was a constant shadow. Every morning, Bob Marley woke with the stiffness in his limbs, the ache deep in his bones, the fatigue that clung to him even after rest. But there was something stronger inside him than the illness, a conviction that music was his duty, and that duty didn't retire. The world wanted to see him. Europe, America, Africa. The requests poured in, but it was Jamaica, always Jamaica, that called the loudest. The island was once again standing on the fault line between hope and chaos. The same streets where Bob had grown up barefoot were filling with tension. And so, even as the cancer gnawed at his body, he decided to return, not for treatment, not for rest, for the stage. April 1980, Harare, Zimbabwe. Before heading home, he made a stop in Africa for the independence celebrations of Zimbabwe. The air was electric, a new nation born from years of struggle. Marley had paid for much of the band's trip himself, determined to be there when freedom was declared. When the crowd outside the stadium swelled beyond capacity, police fired tear gas to push them back. The gas rolled into the arena, stinging eyes, choking lungs. Band members coughed and stumbled, but Marley, coughing, eyes burning, stayed on stage. "Now is the time," he shouted into the mic, "for us to stand together," and he played on. When he finally returned to Jamaica later that year, it wasn't as the same man who had once fled after the shooting. This time he carried scars, some visible, some buried deep, but he also carried the knowledge that his time was short and that every performance might be his last. Kingston, 1980. The stage was set in the heart of the city, a wave of humanity stretching into the night. Marley stepped out, his frame leaner now, his movements a little slower, but his presence unshakable. The first chords of Redemption Song cut through the humid air like a prayer. His voice had changed, not weaker, but sharper, like every word was etched in stone. When he sang, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery," it wasn't just lyrics anymore. It was his final will to the people. He closed the night with "One Love," the chorus rising from the crowd until it felt like the whole island was singing it back to him. Marley stood there, head tilted toward the stars, and smiled as if he could see something no one else could, the shape of his own legacy stretching beyond time. Backstage, away from the lights, he sank into a chair, the adrenaline drained from his body, leaving behind the tremble of exhaustion. A close friend placed a hand on his shoulder and asked if he was all right. Marley looked up, eyes tired but burning. "I'm all right, me brethren, but I have more to do before Jah calls me home." The last tour, the year was 1980. Bob Marley's calendar was filled. The Uprising tour mapped across continents. From the outside, it looked like the peak of a career. Sold-out arenas, screaming fans, headlines that crowned the voice of a generation. But behind the curtain, the truth was stark. His body was failing. The cancer had spread from toe to leg, from leg to liver, from liver to lungs and brain. The doctors warned him, "Stop now, rest, fight." But Marley's answer was always the same. "The people need the music. The music will rest when I do." May 30th, 1980, Zurich, Switzerland. The first night of the tour. The crowd was a sea of faces, rain-soaked but unmovable. Marley stepped into the lights wearing a denim shirt, his guitar hanging low. From a distance, he looked every bit the warrior they remembered. But up close, you could see it, the weight he carried, the slight stiffness in his right leg, the way he leaned into Mike's stand between verses. The band watched him carefully, adjusting tempos when he needed an extra breath. But when the chorus of "Could You Be Loved" exploded, he moved like the years had fallen away, dreadlocks whipping in the air, smile flashing as if the disease had no claim on him at all. Summer, Europe and America. City after city, night after night, Marley poured out what strength he had left. In Paris, the crowd singing was so loud it drowned out the band. Marley stepped back on the mic, closed his eyes, and let them carry the song. In Milan, he knelt on the stage during "No Woman, No Cry," his voice breaking on the word cry, not from the note, but from the truth behind it. And in New York, under the hot lights of Madison Square Garden, he delivered a set so electric that even those who didn't know his music left changed. What no one realized was that during that performance, he was fighting waves of dizziness, the cancer pressing against his balance, his breath. 2 days later, jogging in Central Park, his body betrayed him. He collapsed on the path. His dreadlocks fanned out on the gravel, rushed to the hospital. Scans confirmed what Marley already sensed. The cancer had reached his brain. The doctors told him plainly, "Touring will kill you." But for Bob, that wasn't a reason to stop. It was a reason to finish. September 23rd, 1980, Stanley Theater, Pittsburgh, his final concert. He walked onto the stage knowing it was the last time the lights would rise for him, the last time he would hear that first eruption of applause. There was no announcement, no goodbye in words. The music itself was a farewell. He played for nearly 2 hours, each song stripped of any pretense. Redemption Song was almost whispered, as if meant for one listener alone. And when the final chords of "Get Up, Stand Up" rang out, he stepped back, raised his hand, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the band, to the crowd, to the life he had lived. The applause was deafening. He turned, walked into the shadows of the wings, and never performed again. From that night forward, the stage belonged to memory. But Bob Marley's fight, against a vision, against fear, against a ticking clock, was not over. His last journey was about to begin. Into the light. After Pittsburgh, the roar of the crowd was replaced by a quieter sound. The shuffle of nurses' shoes in hospital corridors, the low hum of medical machines, the whisper of family voices trying not to wake him. Bob Marley had always been emotion, always chasing the next song, the next crowd, the next moment where music could heal. Now, his world had shrunk to a hospital bed, a window, and the memories that came in waves. Autumn 1980, Bavaria, Germany. He sought treatment at the Bavarian clinic of Dr. Joseph Issels, known for unconventional cancer therapies. The snow outside was a shock to a man born a son in salt air. Wrapped in thick sweaters, Marley would sometimes stare for hours at the white landscape, his breath clouding the glass, as if trying to see past the horizon. Friends visited when they could. Rita stayed by his side. Some days, the pain was so heavy he barely spoke. Other days, the old spark returned. A joke, a sudden hum of melody, a flash of that familiar grin. But his body was thinning, his face more angular, his skin stretched tight over bone. The cancer was winning. In early May 1981, Marley's condition worsened. The treatments could no longer keep pace with the disease. His one wish was to return home to Jamaica, to feel the heat on his skin, to see the hills where he'd first strummed the guitar. But his body was too fragile for the long journey. The decision was made to fly him back anyway. A private plane carried him across the Atlantic. Rita beside him, the engines humming like a distant lullaby. Somewhere over the ocean, he looked at her and murmured, "Money can't buy life." May 11th, 1981, Miami, Florida. They never made it to Jamaica. Bob Marley took his last breath at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, the morning light spilling through the blinds. He was 36 years old. When the news reached Kingston, the streets filled with music and mourning. Radios played his songs back to back, the voices of strangers rising together in choruses that blurred with grief. In Trenchtown, people danced barefoot in the dust, tears streaming down their faces, because that's how you honor a man who gave you music. You keep moving. May 21st, 1981, Jamaica. His state funeral was a national event. The casket, draped in the Ethiopian flag, was carried through the streets on the shoulders of soldiers and Rastafarian elders. Inside lay Marley's guitar, the same one that had once been his weapon, placed gently across his chest. Tens of thousands lined the roads. Some waved red, gold, and green flags. Others simply stood, hands over their hearts, as the procession passed. At the gravesite in 9 Mile, where it all begun, the final prayer rose into the warm Jamaican air. The coffin was lowered. The crowd sang "One Love, One Last Time," and as the voices faded, the silence was not empty. It was full of the knowledge that Bob Marley's fight had not ended with him. His songs were still out there, traveling faster than any bullet, stronger than any fear, impossible to kill. Legacy, he once said, "My life is for people. In death, he belonged to the world."